President Rowe, I think, were you going to invite AJ to speak?
Yes, I was, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thank
Over
you,
to
Madam
you.
President. Thank you. And thank
Too many
you.
presidents here.
I know.
President Joseph.
It's awesome.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you and your families are healthy and safe. Before we get any further, I would like to let you all know that we will host a town hall this Friday, Juneteenth, to discuss plans to combat systemic injustice. This is an opportunity for students to bring their ideas, concerns, and policy ideas. We have 300 slots, but we'll have no administration response. This is a conversation by and for students, and we want to do the best we can to create an inclusive and inviting environment for them. Once again, it will be this Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. More information can be found on the Student Assembly's social media platforms and as well as emails that we have sent out. When Kyle and I decided to run for student body president and vice president, we planned to tackle mental health, diversity and inclusion, campus safety, sexual assault, and various other issues on our campus. Recognizing their immense importance then, but we did not know how even more pivotal these missions will become. This is an unprecedented disaster and a worldwide struggle that has uprooted the lives of many and is ravaging vulnerable communities. But the worst thing that has happened is that this pandemic has intensified a greater plague that has afflicted this country for far too long. The pandemic of systemic injustice, racism, and prejudice is a disease that has rotted away at our governing systems and communities for far too long. I know that you all haven't had the opportunity to get acquainted with me, as I am still very new to this and trying to learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can. While I was already nervous to speak before you today, the recent appalling murders have made this even more nerve-wracking. However, a wise man once told me to always speak my truth, so I will do so today. And in that spirit, I ask you to receive my words today, not only as a student body president, but as a Black man. This isn't propaganda or politics. It's my life. I offer my thoughts to you today with as much candor and respect as I possibly can to express the urgency necessary for actual change to happen. What I will say today does not necessarily emphasize what the Student Assembly is doing, but rather what we all should do to combat an evil that has gone unchecked for too long, an appeal directed at our better inclinations and our hearts. 3 weeks ago, I saw something that will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. And a day hasn't passed where I don't think about it and tear up at least once. As a student who focuses on slavery and Jim Crow and how they are embedded within our system, I have seen many photos of lynch victims and the like. I have seen Emmett Till's photo countless times. I have watched all of the videos since then of police brutality and violence in Black communities. I saw Philando's video, Ahmaud's, Breonna's, now Rayshard's, and the list goes on. But none of them prepared me for the pure evil and hatred that I saw in George Floyd's video. It was torture. I have never seen anything like that. It was evil, again, in its greatest form, totally unchecked. And yet, while that video was horrific, the pain that I felt when I watched it was eerily familiar. It was a reincarnation of the ways they tortured Black people before they lynched them, my ancestors. That ancestral pain, it starts in the pit of your stomach and rises, and it paralyzes you. And as I speak before you now, I can feel it. Many Black students at William and Mary and around the world feel it. It reminds us of an unfortunate reality, despite any small privileges we enjoy, that we have earned, they can and will be taken from us at a moment's notice. And then I turned inward to reflect on how I got here, how the first 18 years of my life led me to William and Mary, to the South, how I have been one step removed from a bad situation every step of the way. So many times in my life thus far, I could have been in the wrong place at the wrong time and would not witness the many blessings that I have received over the years. While I was growing up in a community that was suffering from prejudice and poverty, my mom, while still in school, worked hard to protect me from that pain and suffering. One step removed. When I was afraid that I would not be able to afford to go to college, William and Mary saw something in me that others didn't and gave me the opportunity to thrive. One step removed. When I was pulled over recently for speeding, and I was afraid of how the officer would react, already placing my hands clearly on the steering wheel, starting to record, trying to remember everything that my uncle has taught me about when I am pulled over by the police. He saw my William and Mary bumper sticker, talked to me about it, and left me alone. One step removed. And when I watched that video and I saw George Floyd looking up at me, struggling to breathe, crying out for his mama as he realized that he was going to die, only for me to look above him and see that officer glare at me with such deep hatred, I thought to myself, one step removed. And so did every Black student at William and Mary. And we cannot feel this way anymore. As the second oldest institution in the country and a global innovator, William and Mary has many obligations. We have an obligation to produce a game-changing liberal arts education, to provide a space for our students to explore their passions and desires, to produce not just bright minds, but humble and compassionate individuals. Yet, as the ultimate beholder of this country's deepest and darkest memories, and a witness to many of them, our highest obligation should be to remind this nation from which it stems and demand that it reconciles with its past. That is our highest calling. That is our ultimate mantle of innovation and leadership. And that starts with us. It starts with us acknowledging our history. All of it. The vileness and the valor, the cowardice and the leadership, the profound phrases we celebrate, and the complicit silence we too often overlook. Then we must decide what parts of that identity no longer reflect our values as a university. With our identity so intimately involved in all of the great episodes of American history, we should lead to provide a full account of it, especially its dark interludes. This may start with recognizing Samuel Harris and his contributions to the college, but that's all that is. That's all that it is. A symbolic start. We should create a vetting process for building and department names on campus and elevate those that are true pioneers of equality and equity in education. But we must also get past this. We should have faculty that reflect our students and students that reflect our Commonwealth and beyond. We should do more to attract more students of color to this institution. We need to finally dismantle the white supremacist mechanisms created by our predecessors and make it their worst nightmare. A beacon of opportunity and access for all. To close, I'd like to leave you with scripture with which Reverend Al Sharpton used for eulogizing George Floyd during his last memorial service last Tuesday in Houston. This is not to promote any faith or religion, but to voice a call to action that we all need to hear. The reading was from Ephesians 6:12, which says, "For we wrestle not against blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I implore you all to rise against racism and injustice in this country, in the Commonwealth, and at William and Mary. Evil has gone unchecked in this country for far too long and has corrupted the highest echelons of our government. This is the moment where William and Mary must lead to remind this country of where it came from and what it should be. I say this to you as a young Black man trying to do his best to fight the good fight, but also as someone who is already tired. This is a burden that Black people have had to shoulder for too long on their own. As ready as we are, and despite the many petitions that we have already created, this is a profound enemy that my generation cannot fight alone. And with that, I ask you, help us fight against spiritual wickedness in high places. Your college and your nation need you. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. Well said. I think you asked what William and Mary saw in you. I think your accomplishments and your heartfelt words are evidence of that. So thank you. I think we'll really appreciate it, the work that you've done in the past 3 weeks, you and your colleagues on Student Assembly and the student groups that have been out there coming up with an agenda for change. And I think we look forward to hearing and working with you on that. So thank you very much. President Rowe.
Thanks. I just want to echo what you said, AJ. That was incredibly powerful and pointed and right for right now and for the long term. So we're here to be partnered with Student Assembly in defining that path forward together with our faculty and our staff. Thank you. I'm gonna shift our gears to—
Before you shift, I've got a few questions about our diversity efforts. Starting with, and I appreciate AJ and his words, very eloquent, great job. I appreciate you for speaking your truth and for shedding the emotional light on the impatience I think that a lot of us have with the pace of change. We're talking about accelerating, and I want to ask some specific questions with regard to that. One thing is with regard to the symbols on campus and the ways that we continue really to perpetuate white supremacist ideas by naming buildings after white supremacists, by naming programs after white supremacists, by naming awards after white supremacists. I mean, what does it mean to an African-American student trying to become a history major in a program named after one of the preeminent white supremacists of even today, that's still looked at as today as a leader of white supremacism? What does it mean to a student or faculty member that's asked to nominate exemplary faculty based on the traits of Thomas Jefferson or James Monroe? And we have a lot of things like that on campus that keep reminding people, not to mention the slave plantation, that keep reminding people that their lives really do not matter. So on the imagery and idolatry, I'd like to know what our plan is, because I'm not hearing a whole lot on what we're focusing on here with regard to that. Also, with regard to student diversity, we still gloss over the fact that our student diversity is, it is pretty horrible when you look at things, particularly among African Americans at the university. If we don't acknowledge it as a problem, I assume we aren't going to do much to address that problem. So I'd like to hear more about that, and I'd also like to hear more about the notion of doing a diversity audit, which we talked about last summer, but haven't heard anything on. It's kind of difficult to address, a problem of systematic racism, or even one of these elements of systematic racism, if we aren't doing the data analysis and research and getting the recommendations from independent professionals to really guide us as to what our fixes should be. So, you know, how really serious are we about addressing these issues if we aren't doing those basic things?
Thank you for putting that out on the table. I think a couple of those key issues around data are the place that the board has asked us to really dig in this year. And our dashboard on data for student diversity, our dashboard on data for faculty diversity is one that we're building and had intended to align with the strategic plan that got interrupted during COVID. But it's the part of that strategic planning process that we intend to complete this August. Dr. Glover mentioned that the Commonwealth is pulling all of higher ed into that process of setting metrics together, not just independently, which I think Mr. Wolfrick speaks exactly to your point of institutions not thinking solo or in isolation about how to change, but setting our targets as a cohort and holding ourselves accountable to wider than single institution goal setting. So that work is happening at the Commonwealth level right now. It's happening in the equity working group of the Council of Presidents that I'm part of. And Dr. Glover is leading it in partnership with her counterparts. So we will have a D&I strategic plan in August that has pretty clear metrics in it. This last year, we significantly increased financial aid. And we have been doing so since we began the promise in 2013, something like 113%, I think. I won't have that exactly right, but in that time, we restructured our Pell Grants this past year in our admission cycle to make this institution more accessible to a wide range of students, particularly first-gen students and underrepresented students. So these are issues that we've been pressing pretty hard on, pretty directly. In terms of anything, Dr. Glover, that you'd like to add, or Rector Littell?
I would just like to quickly say that the diversity audit that the board asked for is a part of the strategic plan that we're doing this summer. So that is in the process. We were just held up because of the pandemic.
What's the timeline on the audit?
August.
So it's going to be completed by August?
No, it will be starting in August. Because of the pandemic, we weren't able to spend any money or do anything like that. So we have to wait until we're able to move forward with it.
And can you share the parameters of the audit?
We have not made a procurement choice with regards to who will do the actual audit, but it will be an external audit.
We do, as we each year apply for the HEED award and look to other national standards, there are pretty clear national standards about higher ed's growth in diversity and inclusion. So we can, of course, share our last set of applications. That's the framework that we plan to generally, and we'll continue to plan to. And I'm welcoming the board's thoughts from other industries on how to build on that framework from higher ed.
Well, I think one of the things is that, you know, we have had, I wouldn't say perfect, but we've had a lot of good work done for almost 10 years through the Lemon Project, and then, you know, the work of the Task Force on Race and Race Relations. And I don't remember, maybe Lisa, you know, collectively, or Sean, you know, collectively, how many recommendations those two groups made, but I know that all of them have not been implemented. Some for legitimate reasons and some for no other reason maybe than inertia. So I think one thing that would be helpful is if and I don't think it would take very long, but maybe by our July executive committee meeting, Catherine, you could have you know, a listing of all of those recommendations and a status report. And then we can talk about why some of them were not implemented and what a path forward would be for those. I think a lot of what Brian said are components of that, you know, particularly when we look at hiring in particular departments, you know, initiatives that we could do relative to academics. There was the landscape review. And so I think there's a lot of things that, could be addressed if we sort of just went through that list and figured out, are those things that we don't want to do? And if they aren't, then we should be doing them.
Well, there were things that weren't even within the jurisdiction of that review, like minority business, which is embarrassing. I don't know if building renaming and program renaming was on that list, but it's something that needs to be considered.
It is on the list, right?
Well, there was the landscape review that was to look at the whole campus, beyond just buildings, but just to look at, what was the atmosphere that was created. So
The task force is pretty comprehensive. Dr. Glover and I have been looking back at that pretty regularly over the last year as we've laid out the structure for the D&I strategic plan. So we have that audit in our heads. We did a comprehensive alignment of that with the Lemon Project's recommendations when the Lemon Project's 10-year report came in, and shared that with the board. So we can go back to that as well. And it would be, I think, welcome to take stock after 5 years to say, what have we accomplished and what have we not? And we have new leadership. We have a series of new leaders coming in that are, I think, really ready to engage this, even under pandemic.
okay.
Mr. Director, this is Victor. I echo Brian's questions, and I think the time for urgency has passed, and we can't let this period of disruption and upheaval die down, and we find ourselves in another year or 5 years going through this cycle. If DJ's comments didn't ring in my ears loud and clear that, the campus I experienced 35 years ago hasn't evolved that much for him. He's going to have some of those same experiences that I had 35 years ago as a student. So I think this time is different, and I feel the change in the wind. And I think this board and this leadership team can clearly make more than incremental changes around the periphery or the edges, that we can start making some bold and some lasting changes that will give this generation of students a total different experience than those that have gone through before them. And I want to be a part of a leadership team that is making those bold changes. And I hear them from Catherine, I hear them from Sean. I just think we've got to keep ourselves focused and hold ourselves accountable, and just laser focused on in making those changes, because we cannot lose another generation to what many before us have done. So Women Marry can make a difference. And so I just want to put that on the record and support Brian's comments and difficult questions that make me squirm in my seat, but are necessary. So that's that. I don't have a question. I just want to make that heard. Okay.
Mr. Rector.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I think AJ's comments, I guess, touched me personally at a very deep level. I'm sure they touched everyone. But what I think AJ's comments scream louder than anything is the need for William and Mary not to come up with another program, not to, as Victor said, look around the edges of this issue, but to really be a leader. I mean, I think there is an opportunity, because we do have a unique situation in being so wed in that tradition, and that tradition that includes a tradition of racism and an opportunity with respect to innovation. So the question is, for me, not another task force, not another committee, not another study, but a program, a plan that we can announce and implement in ways that people can see measurable change more sooner rather than later. And so, like Victor, I also am prepared to assist in any way that I can in advancing that agenda, because I think we owe it to our students, we owe it to our faculty, and we owe it to ourselves to make that happen. So I just want to once again put that out there, that we can't afford to wait. I do think that there is a momentum and we cannot lose sight of that momentum, and the time is now. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all.